Exciting news today! The Insta360 One R is getting a brand new firmware update that brings 11 new features to this camera. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about those 11 features and also giving you a little overview of this camera in case you're not familiar with it, plus showing you how to do the firmware update. But if you want to skip ahead to those 11 features, you can go ahead to the timestamp below. So what is the Insta360 One R? It's a waterproof and crush-proof action camera, and it's very similar to GoPro. But the main difference is this camera has 3 interchangeable lenses. So you can go from shooting with the 4K mod, which gives you a very similar look to the GoPro, or you can swap it out for the 360 mod, which turns this camera into a 360 camera. Or you can pop on this 1-inch sensor, and this helps you shoot in low lighting, which is something that GoPro and other action cameras have notoriously been horrible at for their entire lifespan. So the Insta360 One R originally came out in February 2020, and at this point it seems like Insta360 will not be doing a yearly release of a brand new camera, which is what GoPro does. So I actually appreciate that, because I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to be buying a brand new camera every year anyway. So instead of releasing a new camera, what Insta360 does is that they release new firmware updates that fixes any existing problems and also adds new features. So it feels like you're getting a brand new camera without having to buy one. The last firmware update came out in September 2020, and that brought 7 new features. I have a video talking all about that firmware update, as well as a full review of this camera, plus a comparison to the GoPro Hero 9, and I'll leave links in the video description below if you want to check those videos out. So how do you install the firmware update? First of all, it's a free update, so if you already bought the camera, you don't have to pay for it. It's already included. And second of all, you want to make sure that you have at least a 50% battery before you start updating the firmware. There are 2 ways to do the firmware update. The first is to connect the camera to the smartphone app, and it's pretty straightforward from there. The second way is actually how I did it, and this way you want to take out the micro SD card from the camera and insert that into your computer, and then download the firmware update directly from the Insta360 website. After that, you insert the micro SD card back into the camera, power the camera back on, and the firmware update should install. So now let's talk about those 11 new features that came with the firmware update. And I'm going to list these in order of importance based on my personal preference. So the first one is the inclusion of a quick start button. So now when you hold down the record button for 2 seconds, the camera automatically starts recording. This is a feature that's been on the GoPro for a long time, and it's one that I really missed having on the Insta360 One R. Because prior to this, you had to hold on the button to turn the camera on and then start recording, and those are precious seconds that sometimes really matter when you're trying to capture something quickly. The second new feature is the inclusion of horizon leveling. Now, horizon leveling was brand new on the GoPro Hero 9, and it's one of the features that really attracted us to GoPro. And when that's enabled, you can be filming in any different angle, but yet the camera should be able to keep the horizon steady. So that's really key, because now you don't have to worry about where your camera is. You can just go about your business or whatever you're filming, and the camera should keep your whole picture really steady. There are a few restrictions to horizon leveling. First of all, it only applies if you're shooting at 30 frames per second using the 4K mod or the 1-inch sensor. There is horizon leveling available on the 360 mod, but it's a very narrow field of view. So this new firmware update should also make that field of view a lot wider when you're shooting in 360. And the other catch is that you can't preview horizon leveling in the camera. You have to download that footage to the Insta360 Studio desktop app or your smartphone app in order to see that horizon leveling take effect. The third new feature is actually a fix, and that is fixing the audio whenever you have an external microphone connected to the Insta360 One R. So in case you don't know, the Insta360 One R, like many other action cameras, does not have a 3.5mm microphone jack, which means that you cannot easily attach an external microphone like a lav mic, a wireless lav mic, or a shotgun mic. And those are really important for giving you better sound. I like the sound on the Insta360 One R, but it's much, much better if you can use an external mic. So Insta360 does have a small adapter that you can plug into the USB-C port, and that gives you that 3.5mm mic jack. But up until now, that mic jack was not very effective, and I felt like it really lowered the levels of the microphone and just didn't do the microphone justice. And so now after this update, there's been a change and supposedly the sound has been fixed. But I'll play you some clips before and after the firmware update, and you can let me know if you hear a difference. So now we're going to do a test to see if that external microphone problem has been fixed. First mic we're going to test out is the Rode Video Micro, so I have that on top of the camera with the wind muff off, pointed directly at me. The Rode Wireless Go should give us some of the best sound, and the nice thing about it is that you can monitor the levels so you can make sure that that microphone is actually connected. But yeah, this is what it sounds like without an external microphone. There should hopefully be a really big difference when the microphone is plugged in. So now we've got horizon leveling on, and we also have the Rode Video Micro plugged in via the Insta360 microphone adapter. Okay, so I plugged in the Rode Wireless Go 2 using that Insta360 adapter, and this is what it sounds like. I'll also go ahead and clip it to myself. So now I have that transmitter with the built-in microphone clipped to my shirt here, and this is what it sounds like when it's plugged into the Insta360 One R. The fourth new feature is one that I'm also super excited about, and that is the ability to adjust the sharpness in the camera before you start shooting. So sharpness now can be adjusted from low to medium to high, and even highest sharpness. And so for me personally, I like to shoot in low or maybe even medium sharpness, but almost never high sharpness, because that just makes your image look a little, I don't know, cartoony or just too crispy. I feel like sharpness is something that you want to add yourself in post-production. You don't really want to let the camera do that. So I love the ability now to control the sharpness. The fifth new feature is car multi-view. So this is really big for us because here in this channel and our vlogging channel, my partner Martin and I do a lot of road trips and travel vlogs. So we're often filming in the car. When you're filming in the car, you have to often make a choice of, do you want the camera to be pointing at you, or do you want it to be pointing at what you and your car are seeing as you're driving? So now with the car multi-view, you can use the 360 mod. It only works with the 360 mod, but when that's enabled, you can now capture video from the front and the back, and you can stack those videos in the Insta360 app. And so you can have a split screen effect where one part of the screen shows one side of the camera and the other side of the screen shows the other side of the camera. Now this is a really big deal for me in particular because I've made 2 other videos on this channel showing our car vlogging setup. And that used to include 2 different cameras pointing in the 2 different directions, and then a lot of time in post-production to stitch those 2 frames together. So I love that it's now integrated as part of the Insta360 One R camera. The 6th new feature is the inclusion of a vivid color profile whenever you're shooting with the 1-inch sensor. So up until this update, you only had 2 other color profiles to choose from, standard and also flat. And flat is really good if you want to do some post-production and color grade your video later. But sometimes you want to take your filming and your colors above the standard profile. And that's when vivid comes in really handy. I would say it's really helpful whenever you're out in nature or shooting something where you really just want the colors to pop. The next feature is the ability to shoot in TimeShift at 6 times speed. So TimeShift is Insta360's version of a hyperlapse, or a stabilized moving time-lapse. And we like to use hyperlapses or time-lapses to show the passage of time in our vlogs. Next up are 2 new templates on the Shot Labs feature of the Insta360 smartphone app. So I love the Insta360 app. It allows you to not only connect to your camera and control it remotely while also previewing your image, but it gives you some really nice templates for doing quick, fast edits. But now there are 2 new ones. The first one is Horizon Flip, and the second one is Overtaker. Now both of these are kind of action oriented, so I don't know that I'm going to be using them so much, but I still love the other templates on Shot Labs, and again I use them a lot for just making a quick creative edit that I can easily upload to Instagram stories or social media. The next new feature is the ability to shoot in 4K at 50 frames per second when you're shooting with the 4K mod or the 1-inch sensor. Now for me personally, I often shoot in 4K 24 or 4K 30 frames per second. But it's always nice to have that option to go up to 50 or even 60 frames per second. The next new feature is loop recording, which essentially turns the Insta360 One R into a dash cam. And this would be a really fantastic dash cam because of the size and also its ability to shoot at up to 4K resolution. And if you're shooting in a low light situation, you could even pop on the 1-inch sensor. So now with loop recording, this becomes an even more viable dash cam. And the final new feature is that this Insta360 One R is now compatible with the Roadie remote. So if you haven't heard of that product, don't worry, I think it's brand new because I hadn't heard of it myself. But it's essentially a remote control that you can attach to the steering wheel of your car so you can control your Insta360 as you're driving. And so I really like this feature because, again, we do a lot of travel vlogs and road trips, and so it's nice to have an easy way to control your camera without getting too distracted. So the Roadie remote is, again, brand new. I think it just came out, and it retails for $40. Can't tell you how good or bad it is because we haven't tried it yet, but the concept is really nice and it will now integrate with this camera. Alright, so those are the 11 brand new features that just came out for the Insta360 One R. Let me know in the comments what you think, which of these features is the most important to you, or are there other features that you'd like to see added to this camera? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.